One of the most shocking and brutal events of the early medieval period has cemented the legacy of the Vikings as a truly devastating force to be reckoned with. In 793, Vikings would land on the holy island of Lindisfarne and horrifically raid the island, cause mass slaughter and steal all of the riches that the island had. This incident shocked most of the world, especially the Christians, and it's believed by some to have been the start of the Viking Age. The raid was incredibly significant as it smashed through the sacred heart of the Northumbrian kingdom and desecrated the place where Christian religion began in Britain. The Lindisfarne raid was a huge propaganda boost for the Vikings, and it meant that other groups would know their name, but also fear them. Today we look at the devastating Viking raid on Lindisfarne, and remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. In order to see why the Viking raid on Lindisfarne shocked so many people, we need to firstly look at the foundations of the area and consider why it was incredibly sacred. A monastery at Lindisfarne was founded around 634 by an Irish monk called St Aidan, who had been sent from Iona off the western coast of Scotland to Northumbria by King Oswald. Aidan set up a priory and remained here until he died in 651. However, he settled on the Holy Island in order to spread the word of Christianity. Previously, Aidan had complained that the English refused to listen to him, but his association with the king allowed him to have some success. The monastery that was established by Aidan had very few buildings according to Bede, having a church and just a cemetery. The church was most probably made from wood, and today it isn't really known where specifically this was on the island. Later the church was covered with a roof, and the walls were capped with sheets of lead. Lindisfarne became the centre for Christianity in the north of England, and missions were embarked upon by the monks to Mercia to tell the people about the word of Christianity. The patron saint of Northumbria, St Cuthbert, was a monk who would later become the abbot of the monastery, and Bede wrote about his life. Cuthbert reformed the monastic rule in the Lindisfarne community, and when he died, his body would be venerated with a shrine becoming a huge place of pilgrimage during even the Tudor period. Miracles would allegedly occur at St Cuthbert's shrine as well. Because of this, the monastery received large gifts of money and precious objects. The monks' way of life in the monastery was dominated by a strict timetable of prayer and work, and they would spend their time reading and learning scripture by attending church services. At its peak, around 30 monks lived at Lindisfarne during the Anglo-Saxon period, but the island would be greater populated by those who wished to learn about Christianity. During the 8th century, the monastery would become even more famous and wealthier, and it became a place of political influence and refuge, and this would become the perfect target for the Viking raid. So it was an incredibly peaceful place, and also a rather wealthy island which centred around Christianity. In 793, horror and terror would hit Holy Island. In Northumbria, there was a belief that some tragic event would take place, and this is described in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. It says, "Here were dreadful forewarnings come over the land of Northumbria, and woefully terrified the people. These were amazing sheets of lightning and whirlwind, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the sky." A great famine soon followed these signs, and shortly after in the same year, the woeful inroads of heathen men destroyed God's church in Lindisfarne Island by fierce robbery and slaughter. It's accepted by most historians that the Viking raid on Lindisfarne took place on the 8th of June, 793, as this was the time of the year which was most favourable for raiding due to the conditions. The Vikings in their longships arrived on the shores of Lindisfarne. The monks who lived in the monastery and the people of the island were taken by complete surprise by the invading forces. They landed on the Holy Island and ran through the whole settlement, causing immense amounts of devastation and destruction. The houses of those people who lived outside of the monastery would have been burned down to the ground, with those inhabitants slaughtered and their wealth and riches stolen. The whole of the island would have been completely pillaged and robbed, but the worst would come inside the monastery, which remember was an incredibly important holy site. The Vikings reached the monastery and would have realised the importance of this building. Everything on the island revolved around the monastic commune, and this is where the Vikings would really strike. Inside the monastery, they would devastate the monks inside, slaughtering them with their axes in a bloodbath. Alcuin, a scholar at the time, wrote to Ethelred, the king of Northumbria, "It is nearly 350 years that we and our fathers have inhabited this most lovely land, and never before has such terror appeared in Britain, as we have now suffered from a pagan race. Behold the church of St Cuthbert, splattered with the blood of the priests of God, despoiled of all its ornaments, a place more venerable than all in Britain, is given as prey to pagan people. The scene inside the monastery would have been horrific. The slaughter of the unarmed and peaceful men of God would have been horrendous. It's thought that the Vikings took no mercy on any of the priests or monks who lived inside the area, and all were slaughtered. Alcuin also mentioned how ornaments were stolen. The monastery would have been covered with holy relics, many of which may have been gold and worth a lot of money. The area did, as mentioned earlier, become wealthy due to the gifts which were pledged in the name of Christianity, but the Vikings would loot the whole of the riches that the monastery possessed. Alcuin would also write that the heathens poured out the blood around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. These accounts really do show the anger towards the Vikings because of the raid. Another chronicler would write of the event. In the same year, the pagans from the northern regions came with a naval force to Britain, like stinging hornets, and spread on all sides like fearful wolves, robbed, tore and slaughtered not only beasts of burden, sheep and oxen, but even priests and deacons, and companies of monks and nuns. And they came to the church of Lindisfarne, laid everything to waste with previous plundering, trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars, and seized all of the treasures of the holy church. They killed some of the brothers, took some away with them in fetters, many they drove out, naked and loaded with insults, some they drowned in the sea. The Vikings did miss one relic, however, the body of St Cuthbert, which was later taken to a different site away from the massacre. The assault on Lindisfarne sent shockwaves all around the Christian world, and the desecration of an incredibly holy site and the murder of the people of God enhanced also the brutal reputation of the Vikings. It wasn't the first Viking raid on Britain, but following this raid, the Vikings would keep returning to England, to the point when they invaded York and captured the city. The effect on Lindisfarne would lead to the area becoming abandoned until the 12th century, when a Norman priory was built on the island. The raid on Lindisfarne was incredibly brutal and savage, but hugely effective for the Vikings. They had got what they wanted, the immense wealth of the monastery and island, the huge bloodshed which helped to spread their brutal and terrifying reputation, and also an attack on England, which they would later build upon. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.